Good evening, fantastic friends of Instagram. We are live again in anticipation of 1 week and 1 day starting Imagination School, and we wanted to come on tonight and have a conversation about obviously how many people are following me and have found me on the internet because of GNM and the 5 biological laws, and we wanted to have a chat about the Imagination School and how someone who is exploring GNM and how, might this be beneficial for you? And like Steve mentioned in the last video, imagination is an operation at every moment in time. And so with regard to your, whatever you got going on health-wise, there is imagination at play. There are assumptions, there are background. When we get into the psyche, the subconscious, that's really what we're working with when you're working with imagination. You're working with the stuff that is sitting way back behind the scenes that is projecting out into the screen of space and into your real physical reality. And so there's a lot that we can do in terms of noticing, paying attention. That's what we teach in awareness school, is really the ability to see. And that's going to be, so somebody did ask at one point, do you need to have taken awareness school before taking imagination school, or can you kind of jump right into it? And so while awareness school and the people that have taken it do have an advantage in the sense that there's skills that you develop over the 10 weeks of awareness school that are going to be extremely beneficial in developing this skill of imagination, it's not necessary, but it could be helpful. And we suggest everybody at some point, if you follow our stuff, to take awareness school at some point. But we are really excited about imagination school and how this work is going to help people kind of just get right into it, right? Kind of get your hands in the clay immediately to start shaping and molding and forming the real stuff of your experience, because it's happening every single moment. You're assuming things, you're imagining things, you are predicting certain outcomes, and the more that we can bring that into awareness, the better.
Mm-hmm. So we have some questions. Before we get into them though, I thought I just, on the spot, I didn't plan this ahead of time. I made this up as it came to mind as you were talking. Actually, I guess it is a question about GNM, right? Was there one here specifically about, because like the overall things on GNM, I thought there was one question. Anyway, how does Imagination School relate to GNM? And pretty much, now, and you can tell me like if you'd like to add something or if I say something that's not correct. But basically with GNM, if you have a conflict, I'm going to assume that you are familiar with it up until that point, there's pretty much like two things that you can do in order to resolve that conflict, in order to, remedy your situation. One is the practical solution, which is, I hate my neighbor because he's encroaching on my territory. So I have a territorial anger conflict. I need to, get rid of the neighbor or move away or, do something like that. That's practical. Take the neighbor out of the picture or take your picture away from the neighbor. We don't actually suggest getting rid of people, but you get the idea. And the other option is to change your experience of the situation, which is say, stop getting so uptight about your neighbor. Do you know what I'm saying? Take the steps necessary to contact HOA or do whatever, but like stop getting so riled up, ramped up, stop getting so freaked out about the fact that it's going on. So there's these two different options when it comes to resolving a conflict. I think that right use of imagination can assist a person with either of those or with both. So let's start with the practical solution, right? I don't know if you've ever had this experience before, but you know that you need to do something, or you have a reason to believe that your life is not going to improve until you do something. But for some reason, there's a part of you that is really just repelled by the notion of doing it. Procrastination, putting things off. And one of the things that I've noticed is the more I feel I need to do something, the more convinced I am that until I do that thing, I can't get what I want, or I can't get rid of what I don't want. Very often, I have a very intense awareness of the undoneness of the task. I don't know if that makes sense to you. I mean, I am acutely aware of the fact that I am one who has not done what needs to be done. And you would think that that would build up pressure and result in my doing it. And sometimes it does, but not infrequently. The awareness of being one who hasn't done the thing tends to be productive of mental activities and the creation of feelings and emotional states that generate behaviors that contribute to I call it the perpetuation of undoneness. Can you relate? I don't know if you relate this like at the pile of something that you've been meaning to clean up for a really long time. and you really have no explanation for why it hasn't been cleaned up yet. But it begins to, it's the simplest thing in the world in theory, but in practice, it actually comes to be something that's almost, I don't know how to do that. It's like it would be like doing calculus or something. It's a mystery to me how on earth I'm ever going to get those receipts filed away or whatever the case is. I have found that using my imagination to enter into and experience the state of having already completed the task, right? I enter into the state of having taken the practical steps to resolve the situation. When I do it correctly and persistently, I find that in a strange way, without coaching myself or prompting myself or kind of, what they call it, getting your dander up, working myself up into a state where I'm going to do it, I find myself just falling into the act of taking the actions that I need to take. And so if there is a practical solution to your situation and you know what that situation is, but for some reason you have difficulty getting yourself to do it. And a lot of that will be self-concept stuff. A lot of it will be when you think about doing it, your mind starts to focus on what you don't want, what might go wrong, who might be angry at you, whose feelings might get hurt, or just kind of like the scary unknown unknowns or whatever. All of those things can prevent you from taking actions to remedy situations in practical ways that will perhaps help you resolve a conflict, even if that stuff is well within your power. Like even if there's a button and you've just got to push that button, but for whatever reason you're having difficulty bringing yourself to do it. Proper use of your stop putting pressure on yourself if the pressure that you're putting on yourself is feeding into and exacerbating your awareness of the undoneness of the thing. It's like I'm pumping my awareness into the undoneness and inflating the undoneness of the task that causes it to occupy more space in my experience, causes me to feel smaller and smaller and smaller relative to the undoneness of the thing I must do in order to get what I want or to be saved or get away from what I don't want. And so the imagination thing, it's this thing, what would it be like if it were done? What would it be like if I've done what it is that I need to do? I'm afraid to leave my partner. I'm afraid to ask this person to be my partner. I'm afraid to this, that, the other thing. What would it be like if you already did it? What would it's like to be you be like? And right use of your imagination will allow you to answer that question not with words, answer that question not with some kind of a description, but actually answer that question with a subjective felt sensation on the inside. And I have found that there's no better way to evoke from myself those behaviors which will result in the doneness of the task than to just stop putting that unproductive pressure on myself and use my imagination to really feel my way into a state of awareness relative to the task, where the task is behind me, the task is complete, everything is great, everything's fantastic. What does I feel like? What's the feeling of I when I am aware as being one for whom that task is in the history? That it is an achievement, it's a victory in my past. So that's pretty good. So that's half of it. That's the practical solution. Now, I think it's probably even more obvious the sort of the experiential solution, right? I'm really upset with my neighbor and I don't want to move. Maybe I can't move, right? Maybe I'm in a situation that it's not easy for me to remedy. My conflict relates to some characteristic in another person that I cannot interpersonally force them to change. Very often it's a husband. Very often it's a partner, not always. Sometimes it's a person at work or it's a whatever. Well, you can use your imagination to discover what it's like to be you, would be like if you were not bothered by this behavior, or if the behavior were different than it is. Really fully persuading yourself on the inside, I don't struggle with this feeling anymore. This is not something that, and the whole thing, it's not denying your feeling. It's asking yourself what it's like to be you would be like if this feeling weren't a problem for you anymore, if you were at peace with this situation, if you were okay with it. You can also, by the way, imagine things being different than they actually are. Imagine people's behavior being different than it actually is. There's all sorts of things that you can do, and you learn how to become really emotionally involved with and emotionally responsive to what you want, rather than being super emotionally involved with and emotionally responsive to what you don't want. Now, I heard someone think this. They said, well, if you're in a bad relationship and the person's mistreating you, you shouldn't imagine them being nice. You should get out of the relationship. I tend to agree with that. But there's a lot of people who stay in relationships where they're not happy, and they stay in them, and they use their imagination like a bellow in a fire, and they replay all the unpleasant conversations, and they do. And so, a situation like that, I would say one of two things. Imagine yourself free of that situation, and impress that upon yourself in a way that will cause you naturally and automatically to behave your way out of it, whatever that means. Or start to, within yourself, start to become emotionally involved with alternative interpersonal dynamics. And so, as far as I can tell, proper use of your imagination is going to be extremely useful when it comes to moving in the direction of resolving a conflict, right? Whether or not, regardless of whether it's going to be a practical resolution, move away, get a this, get rid of a that, whatever, or if it's going to be I want to so thoroughly modify my concept of self that my experience of both self and world is so different that the conflict that I had pertaining to this situation can no longer exist, because in a very meaningful sense, the person who had that conflict does not exist anymore. Yes. The ideas that were active within the mind of the individual that allowed that individual to experience the conflict with regard to the situation and then stay in that conflict for a protracted period, long enough for the person to say, geez, what's wrong with me? Oh, this school of thought says I have a conflict. What's that? Long enough for me to do all that research and figure that stuff out. The conflict's still active, right? There are ideas within me. I have a concept of myself that is contributing to my experience of self, other, world, etc. And as I begin to change those things, very often the foundation of the conflict goes away.
Exactly.
And so I think that is a way of kind of honoring the nuts and bolts of GNM. And there's some really strict people out there that's like it's a practical solution to the. And I think that's a useful perspective to have, even if that's true. Personal experience with clients and all of this is just stop being in your imagination. Stop being someone who hasn't done what it is you need to do. Start being within yourself. Start experiencing yourself as one who has done it. And what I found is that when you catch that feeling, you keep that feeling going. That feeling tends to evoke from you those behaviors that will turn you in objective fact into a person who has done those things. It's very hard to describe to someone who hasn't experienced it, but once you experience it, you go, oh, God, it sounded like bullshit before. I mean, maybe it sounded nice and I liked it, but it just kind of sounded too much like magical thinking. But then you realize it's not magical thinking, that if you have a small child and you impress upon that child and you impress into their subconscious ideas about themselves, the world, and other people, that those impressions will then manifest as behavioral expressions that will affect the quality of that child's life. That doesn't seem like magical thinking. That kind of seems like common sense. And so you just understand that you're quite similar to that. And now the question then becomes, at a practical level, how do I effectively impress myself in the ways that I want to, as effectively as I impress myself in ways that I don't want to? It's very easy to impress upon yourself the idea that everyone in your life is a piece of crap, or no one appreciates you, or no matter how hard you try, other people screw up all your best work and all this different stuff. It's very easy to inadvertently impress yourself with unproductive ideas, or ideas that will be productive of outcomes you don't want. It can be a little bit harder to impress yourself on purpose, because when you start to impress yourself on purpose, I think we talked about this in the first video, a lot of people know how to be charming, but if they try to be charming, they get kind of awkward. And the same thing with imagination. A lot of people, everyone, they imagine all day long. They don't notice it because the imagination kind of is perfectly in line with their thinking, and so it seems like nothing. But the moment they start trying to imagine on purpose, a little voice in their head goes, "Well, this is stupid. Why are you doing this? Or this is ridiculous. You're 49 years old. You think you're going to imagine and change your life? How stupid! This is another ridiculous new age manifestation bullshit." All these voices begin to come in. Where is that voice when you're having a conversation with yourself about how awful someone else in your life is? When you're impressing those ideas upon yourself, that voice isn't saying, well, now hang on a second, you're being unfair. That voice only comes online when you're operating your imagination consciously and to a positive end. So a lot of what we'll be doing in Imagination School is kind of guiding you through some of the practical challenges that people encounter when they start trying to imagine on purpose. Doubt is a major issue for people. Doubt sort of destroys the creative potency of an imaginal act. But you know what? When you're on your way to work and you're thinking about what a piece of shit those people in your office are, you don't doubt. You see what I'm saying? When you're worried about something going wrong tomorrow, there's no doubt. You don't go, oh no, what if the thing doesn't go wrong? There's no doubt. It's just imaginal activity, picture making, internal dialogue, and you go, oh, that's really terrible. You suspend disbelief completely when imagination is running in an uncontrolled manner. And so one of the things is learning how to suspend unbelief, suspend disbelief, when you're also making wonderful, lovely pictures and all that, so that you can impress yourself in a positive way.
Oh, yes. All of that was so good. And so one of my favorite stories of someone I've worked with that used imagination to resolve her conflict is a mom who was dealing with, she got a divorce, which was a, great thing in her life. She was not happy with the person she was with. And, but as soon as the divorce occurred, she now had to deal with the conundrum of her child going with the ex-partner. And so this was a big thing in her life. And when this occurred, she had a flare-up of terrible psoriasis. And this was ongoing, and she tried all the holistic things and all of the supplements and all the natural light and all the stuff to try to resolve this skin issue she was having. And, when we looked at it from the GNM perspective, and we did the timeline and looked at when it started, it was like, okay, so this is about your child being away from you. And where it showed up was like where you hold a child, like right on her, between her breasts and on her belly, like right here. And so the dilemma was every time there was any type of hearing with the court, any type of communication with the ex about the child going to their place, about overnight visits, and these things were just, every time she thought of it, she was in resistance, right? She's afraid that her child's going to be traumatized. And so, the recommendation was, okay, this is one of those situations where practical resolution, which would be the child not having to go be with the ex at all, that wasn't available to her. So she used her imagination to imagine outcomes every step of the way. And she was in one of our weekly classes at the time. So it was really cool in real time to, kind of be talking about the things we were talking about, because we were doing this back with a class we did called Radically Resourceful, which was, we infused a lot of these principles back then too. And so she, imagined, I was like, okay, sit down and imagine vividly hearing what you want to hear from, from the ex, from the therapist. And she did. So she sat down and heard the words of exactly what she wanted to hear. That was the resolution, to the big conflict at the time. And then she came back to the meeting and she's like, the ex said exactly what I wanted him to say. The therapist said exactly what I wanted them to say. And it was through the, so she had to overcome the doubt, right? The part of the mind that's like, yeah, right. You're just going to imagine, here's this person who everything about your history with them, everything about it says this isn't going to happen. There's no way they're going to say that. There's no way they're going to back down from this. There's no way they're going to chill out about that. But she did it anyway, and so she persisted in the imaginal act, and then on the outside got the evidence. And one of the things too that we'll probably cover this a ton in imagination school is that, this belief that it just would have happened anyway. Because that's what the rational mind wants to just, would have happened anyways. It's you didn't really do anything. You didn't imagine this into being. It just, they would have done it anyways. But if you can, really get past that and notice, you're like constantly tuning in to different realities, right? You're constantly tuning into different outcomes. Every potentiality exists. And you, depending on what you are doing right here and now, and this is something you have to work with your belief. Like, do I believe that I'm just on this track and it doesn't matter, and the stuff that's going to happen was determined by stuff that happened a way long time ago, and there's nothing I can do about that now, so now I'm kind of stuck with the outcomes from this track that I'm on? Do you believe that? Or do you believe that based on what I do now, if I change what I'm imagining, the seeds that I'm planting, who I'm being, the way I'm vibrating, the way I'm acting and feeling, behaving, that can get me on a new trajectory that will change what happens tomorrow morning, that will change what happens tomorrow afternoon, right? Do you believe that, right? That so much of this is about, do you believe in your imagination? Do you believe that you have this creative power within you? Or do you believe that you are a victim of stuff from the past, even stuff you've done in the past, stuff that was done to you, stuff that is outside of your control? And that's why I love everything about the things that I bring forth through my channel is all about freedom. Right? That's why I teach about GNM, because it brings freedom, right? Instead of feeling like, oh, this symptom is because of my genes. You're helpless if it's because of your genes. Oh, this symptom is because of germs. Well, you're helpless because germs can just get you anywhere. Oh, this is because of things that are outside of my control. You're not free if you are a victim to things that are outside of your control. And so everything that I like and that I'm drawn to is all about, how can I be more free? What makes the most sense to me and what brings me the most peace, the most freedom? And that's why, imagination is kind of the ultimate of that. It's what can make you stuck. is only what you're believing can make you stuck. And once you realize that you can imagine beyond that, right? And when it comes to like symptoms and health stuff, we can see, wow, your whole reality is being shaped. And you mentioned something, you said about like children. A lot of times people will like have a hard time grasping GNM and the idea that, what do you mean, a child, a baby? How can a baby be born with a disease? It has to be genetic, without realizing that like the words that were spoken to the mother, the words spoken by the doctor, the thing that the mother-in-law said to the daughter-in-law, all of that is being impressed. These impressions, right? Impressing on the child, self-devaluation or, identity conflict, anger, all of these things. It's like, what was the mother experiencing? And the child is just this sensitive receiver of all the data and all the information. And when you realize how someone says one word, how a word can impress you, right? A phrase, something said to you, something said offhanded about you in a room, how that can impress the psyche and the subconscious, and how that can lead to adaptations in the body because the child just receives all of this information. And so, yes, all of this is operating at every moment in time. Something is said and then the imagination runs wild. It makes assumptions, right? Because they said that about me, that must mean I'm no good, or that must mean there's something wrong with me. That must mean, fill in the blank about me. And that's the thing that a lot of people are looking for, right? They're like, oh yeah, I've had this problem, this issue since someone asked a question, like a GNM question earlier on about like, oh, my kid's allergic to dogs now and sniffling and sneezing. Okay, that's a stink conflict. So a stink conflict happened either in relation to the dog itself, or there was something annoying, some kind of stink, some kind of a scent. I couldn't sniff something out, some type of conflict. And the dog hair just happened to get flagged, tracked into that conflict. And so you have to trace back, when did this symptom first begin? When did they first start reacting to the dog? And that's going to help you to figure out, okay, well, what was the environment in the home like at the time? What stunk to that kid? And if that child, and that's the thing, is we have the power to use our imagination to see the situation differently. And so that's where we would, where you could potentially use this type of tool to navigate through that kind of situation.
Mm-hmm. So that, when it comes to like the imagination stuff, I mean, to be honest with you, I have a little bit of like native cynicism. It's, what I'm talking about? Like, just, it's not like, even though I've kind of grown beyond fully believing in that sort of cynical incredulity, the pattern is still within me. So like, the thought will come up, and I used to put my whole weight behind it, right? And now I don't really do that anymore. I just recognize, oh, that's a pattern that comes up, and I kind of, I don't just jump on that ride just because it's going by. But I have a certain tendency in that regard. And so when I would hear things about like the imagination, I even when a part of me recognized I wasn't justified in dismissing it, there was a part of me that was dismissive of it. And so basically, there's kind of probably two people listening to this video, two types of people who are very inclined to believe that what we're saying is probably true. And then there's people who are inclined to, it's not like a personal thing. It's like, it's not like like being like disrespectful of us or anything like that, but it's in your heart of hearts. It's because a lot of people will superficially sort of maybe say, oh, maybe they teach good stuff. I like the stuff they teach. I'm going to take this course. But inwardly, the part that lords over you and the part that pushes you around when no one's looking because it's within you, right? In the secret places of your heart, there's someone in there going, oh, this isn't going to work for you, or you don't know how to do this, or you can't win it. Well, their imagination's operating at every moment in time. And so basically, people who are inclined to believe it, people are inclined to not believe it. Those two groups have one thing in common, right? And it's a surprising thing. Both of those groups are equally unlikely to do anything about their belief. The people who are like, oh yeah, that sounds great, I love that. They don't do anything. I have witnessed this unfold within my own self as I brought myself around and say, you know what, there's something to this. It's worth my time and my effort to read about this, and maybe I'll even blah 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 to other people about it and all this different stuff. I wasn't doing it. I would go days without doing it. I would think about it, and I would think about doing it, and I would deceive myself into believing that I was actually doing it. And it reminds me, and then I would persist in that delusion until, for some reason or another, I started to exercise my imagination on purpose, and I would then make contact with it, and it was like I forgot to breathe for 3 days. It's the strangest thing. And so there's this admonition in the Christian tradition: be a doer of the word, not a hearer only. Deceiving yourself, which I find so interesting. And I thought, oh my Lord, what an interesting sequence of words that when I was a child, that meant nothing to me. And it wasn't until I started trying to like steward my imagination and pay attention to what this presence within me, pay attention to what it was doing. Not to try to force it all the time to be, oh, let's do flowers, and now we'll do gumdrops, and now we'll do wonderful rainbows where everyone's happy. It wasn't like that. It was like, get it kind of like out of the gutter. And by the gutter, I don't mean thinking about things I like that someone thinks are bad. I'm talking about get it out of the gutter of just disgusting pessimism and like crotchety, stodgy, negative bullshit that made me miserable, right? And I would, try to do that, and then I would just forget and lapse right back into it. And I'd like this, wasting this talent. I'd be better off if I didn't have an imagination at all with the way that I was using it. And then I would say, oh my God. And that was the same person who would sit on the couch and would read Neville, or would do this and that, maybe even write about it and all this different stuff. And I tell you something about that. Something about when your behind leaves the couch, where you read the wonderful book. It's like a cord gets severed and everything that you read completely turns off, and you're just every bit as negative a piece of crap as you ever were. And I was like, oh, that's that admonition, because it's not that it's necessarily hard to do in the beginning. It can be a little challenging to get the motor running. It's almost like a car that hadn't started for a really long time. Or if you've ever really neglected like your mobility, haven't tried to touch your toes, or haven't tried to sit in a kind of a pancake stretch or something like that, and you do it, it kind of like aches. It's kind of like the tissues are like, what are you doing? I thought we weren't doing this anymore. The imagination's a little bit like that in the beginning. Or like if you walk into, I don't know, if you put a block of clay in a sub-zero freezer and then got it out and started trying to like mold something beautiful with it, even if you're a wonderful sculptor or you've got great native talent, it'd be very hard. It's going to take time to kind of warm it up. Imagination is kind of that way. So it can be challenging in the beginning, but in general, it's not hard to do. But what I found is that it is extremely easy to not do. Extremely, extremely easy to not do. It's easy to not imagine deliberately when you're having a crappy day, because you're having a crappy day and you want to tend to imagine along those crappy lines. It's very easy, though, not to imagine deliberately when you're having a wonderful day, because you're having a wonderful day. Who wants to sow seeds of wonder and delight when you are reaping a harvest that's really fantastic? It's like, the grasshopper and the ant, or the whatever. There's the one that's industrious, and there's the one that's profligate and just, taking advantage of the things that are readily available. And so, to me, it's like that when I was having these good days, and therefore I was neglecting my imagination, it was as though I were a locomotive on a train track. And right up ahead of me, there were no train tracks laid down yet. But I, the locomotive, said, why would I bother laying down additional tracks? I'm on tracks right now. Everything's fine. And it wasn't until a certain number of times of derailing myself, not imagining because I'm good right now, I'm gliding, things are wonderful. It took a while for the gliding to say, you like to glide? Well, hey, stupid, why don't you lay down some more tracks so that you'll be gliding tomorrow as nicely as you're gliding today? Do your future self a favor. And so, reflecting then on be a doer of the word, not a hearer only. That's what, deceiving yourself. And then it carries on from there. Some people have an allergy to kind of like talk that they've heard at church or whatever. Sorry about that. It's not what you think. That's the only thing I'll say. It's not what you think. And then it goes on to say that because if you hear about this and you don't act upon it, you're like a person who stands in front of a mirror and sees exactly what she looks like. But the moment that she turns her face away from the mirror, she completely forgets what she looks like, as though she never looked in the mirror at all. And I said, oh my gosh, yes. I sit down and I read it and I go, my brain is illuminated. And I say, that makes so much sense. I know what it's like to waste this talent. I know what it's like to use it properly. I know what I'm going to do today. And then I get up and immediately my imagination goes right into the gutter. It goes right into making pictures of things I don't want. Or it's just imagining trivial crap, right? That sort of causes me just to feel, I don't know, it's like eating empty calories. You know what I'm saying? And so, like, what an interesting admonition. So the thing that the two people have in common, those who are skeptical and those who are inclined towards this kind of thinking, they're both very unlikely to ever actually persistently apply what it is that we're talking about. And so if you kind of doubt it a little bit, I would say to you, you're not really in bad shape. Because you're not really any worse off than the people who are what we call like personal growth junkies here, who are like, oh boy, another course. I mean, yeah, let's do it. And you come to the meetings and we have a wonderful time together. We enjoy you. Hopefully you enjoy us and all that different stuff. And then off goes the camera, and then back goes the mind to its kind of mechanical thinking. And so there is this, and this is, by the way, kind of what Imagination School is going to be like, right? It's about what practically stands in the way of a person who's on board with this in principle, practicing it in action. in the reality of it. Sometimes the thing is that the situation is really big, but really, honestly, the problem is that you have not spent time with your imagination. You have not trained your imagination so that your imagination is not responsive to you. If you've got a very well-trained dog, it doesn't matter what's happening. Oh, there's another dog that's provoking him. Oh, there's a pack of dogs that are running away. Oh, someone fired a gun, or a car backfired, or oh, it was if you tell the dog to come to you, the dog comes to you. The dog has good recall. It doesn't matter what's going on, the dog comes to you, right? Even if it's scared, even if it's upset, it's so just kind of hardwired into its brain. If, however, you've got a dog that under the right circumstances, if the sun's in the right position, and if the constellations are just right, and if the right person's in office as president, and you tell that dog to come to you, it will listen. It's like, well, that's not what you need. What you need is a dog that will come to you in a situation where it's high stress and where there's a lot of distractions going on. And for me, it's like I want my imagination to be trained in that way. And the way you do that is it's called praying without ceasing, making it just an integrated part of your life, so that you repeat to yourself at intervals, imagination is an operation at every moment in time. Notice that there's no condemnation there, there's no justification. And what that means is that I'm not saying to myself, oh, I'm not going to get what I want because I'm not imagining enough, and that's not good, and that's imagining right there. And I'm also not saying to myself, well, I'm not imagining what I want, but my wife is just such a pain in the ass that no reasonable person could be imagined. That's called justification, right? Those two things are basically hell, because it's like I'm stuck somewhere I don't want to be, and I'm using my words to bind myself into that state even further. It's just saying to yourself, matter-of-factly, imagination is an operation at every moment in time. If there is an implicit, and therefore you should, and therefore you shouldn't, you're going to train yourself to resent the awareness that would over time begin to set you free from patterns that don't serve you. So it's just becoming sensitive to this thing that's operating within you, and then it's learning to play this instrument. And there are certain, I would say that there are certain principles, just like in jazz or in classical music, there are chords, and there are different things, and then there are sort of progressions, and there are, rules of harmony. You can always tell when I'm kind of delving into an area where it's like, I kind of know what I'm talking about, but mostly don't. There are those, and you master those rules so that you can then go into the area where you really express yourself as a creative individual. And a lot of what we're going to be doing here is, guiding you through the process of either being a hearer and believer of the word, but not a doer, or, and getting you to the point where my personal experience is that the reasoning mind or the surface mind wants really badly to seize upon a superficial understanding of this and say, oh yeah, that's great, I love that. Oh, you love that? Yeah, I'm in that Facebook group, blah, 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 blah. And it wants to prevent the seed from like going far into your mind and sort of anchoring itself in a place where it can really start to sprout and change everything. And change everything in a way, by the way, that is going to make you more you, and make your life more about what you want, and put you more in control of kind of the things that are going on. It's not about what you should do. It's not that God wants you to use your imagination in a nice way and you're using it in a negative way, and so he's mad and he's not going to give you what you want. It's not any of that. It's really coming to know yourself better and figuring out how you work so that you can persuade yourself of things that you want to be persuaded of. And so that you can kind of harness this creative thing within you, consciousness, awareness, whatever, and get it so that it is sort of flowing in the direction of what you want, rather than flowing aimlessly, or rather than flowing in the direction of what you don't want. And if it flows in the direction of what you don't want every once in a while, it would be nice if you had the ability, awareness, to say, I think some of my creative energies are leaking right now. Right? I think that's what's happening. I think I may be inadvertently contributing to the perpetuation or the exacerbation of what I do not want right now. And learn really to tell the difference, because in my experience, it's not about never touching on a topic that anybody might think is negative. It's not about that. It's about a personal relationship with your sort of, with your inner being is kind of funny, but you get the idea. With inwardly, what is my consciousness doing right now? Does my consciousness like being shaped in the way that it's shaped right now? What state am I in? Not what state do they think that I'm in because of what I'm talking about, or because of that. No. What it's like to be me like as a result of dwelling on this topic? Is this positive? Is this energy upturned? Are we flowing in a direction that we want to go? Or are we not? Who cares what they think? They don't matter. It's not relevant, right? It's about getting very clear and developing the ability to not deceive yourself, because there will be certain things that you'll think that your kind of religious mind, whether you are traditionally religious or not, you've got a shoulding religious element. Everyone does. Your religious mind thinks that this is a topic that is not compatible with what we're sharing with you. And then your religious mind, probably, there are certain things that you think you're so justified in doing that are absolutely harmful for you. They're absolutely inconsistent with what you want. And it's about developing the ability to sort of see through that and to get to that place where it's like nothing's unclean unto itself. But what is it? To him that esteemeth a thing to be unclean, to him it is unclean. I'm telling you, what is that? That is an admonition that goes, how does it affect the feeling of I for you? What it's like to be you like when you brood on that topic? When you enter into that state, how does it feel? That's what's relevant, because it's how it's affecting your consciousness, your awareness. That's what's going to determine the effect it has on your life.
Yeah, Kelly says, I think there's also the fear of succeeding that gets in the way of imagining. I feel that.
That's a self-concept thing. And I would say that that's a who and when am I aware of being. And so if you sit there and you say to if you imagine, so if you're thinking about imagining, I have to just say one thing. Please, just I need you to wait just a minute. And no, don't, you cannot go that way. I'm sorry. Just wait. I love you so much. We have a dog here I adore more than almost anything else I can think of. But she comes in and intrudes in the video, and so I'm conflicted. It's like I want to.
Okay, she can. It's okay if that.
Oh, it is. Okay, go on through, sweetheart. Go on. She's making such a sweet face. I love you, Pearl.
You're such a darling. Okay, there you go.
How do we do anything with these honeys? Okay, settle down. I know. Comes. Okay. Sorry about that. Do you know what was I talking about? Do you
I don't even know. We're gonna have a little
sweetheart
moment with the doggies. Oh, darling. This is the Pearl of great price.
This is Pearly Whirly. You're such an angel.
She really is.
An enormous, huge angel.
She's huge.
Sorry, I lost
totally
my
lost the thread.
The person who was talking about being afraid of whatever. So I'm thinking about imagining having what I want, and then something inside of me says, that's scary, or you feel uncomfortable, or you feel nervous or embarrassed, or you imagine what somebody from your history, like your grandmother or your mother or your father, what would that person think if they knew I was imagining having or being or doing this thing? Weird stuff like that. And it's not normally like totally conscious or clearly articulated. It's like a background influence that's affecting. It's not an assumption or a belief is a thought that you've mastered so well you don't have to think it. It exerts influence on you at every moment in time. So stuff like that happens. And so the thing is, you have to imagine yourself to be a person, a certain kind of person, in order to feel weird, funny, sheepish, anxious, afraid, embarrassed. Some people it's like sinful or improper, right? For to imagine yourself doing these things. In order to have that experience, you have to be imagining yourself to be. There is not something that you just are. That you're conceiving yourself, you're bringing yourself into being. Your self-concept is, basically a collection of ideas that you have consented to as true. Ideas about yourself, ideas about you're so fantastic and wonderful. Ideas about, what you want to do is you just want to imagine that God loves you every bit as much as I love Pearly Whirly, and that everything that you do is wonderful and magnificent. And then it's like God wants you to want the things that you want, and He wants you to feel good about those things. Practice that, for example. Imagine, and this is the thing, who and what would I need to be aware of being in order to be totally comfortable imagining that I have this, imagining that I am this, imagining that this is, this desire is fulfilled for me. And this is, very interesting thing in the Bible. It says He thought it not robbery. He thought it not robbery to make Himself one with God, right? So what would it take for you to think it not robbery, to experience yourself as being someone who, I don't know what it is for you, has what you want to have, is what it is that you want to be, is doing the thing that you want to be doing, has already achieved the thing. And that's, think about that. You read it, it's kind of like weird sort of like, King James language or whatever, but to think it not robbery. If you think it robbery, that's when you feel funny or nervous or afraid, or I feel a little bit guilty. Oh, I feel like I'm on a diet and I'm eating a cookie. Do you know what I'm saying? Oh, I
have enough and I want even more. Oh,
Oh, yeah, that's not right. Or, some people do this weird thing where they feel like embarrassed or ashamed that they would ever think that someone like that would be interested in them. Like you're, you know what I mean? Like you were, oh, that's someone I'm supposed to pedestalize and sort of fantasize. That's not someone I'm supposed to see as my equal that I would approach and say, hey, how you doing? You want to go do whatever, And for some people it's a person. For some people it is a profession. For some people it's maybe a physical state, like a level of fitness or of desirability, or maybe it's just satisfaction with your own body. It's all the same stuff, basically. And the thing is that when those things seem big to you, it is an indication that you have made yourself small. Now, again, we're getting sort of heavy on the Bible stuff here, but this is an amazing passage in the Bible where basically the group is having a hard time. It's the Israelites are having a hard time. That where I'm setting the stage in very broad strokes. And someone comes along and says, you're complaining because there are giants in this land and that there are these enormous armies that are kind of threatening us and harrying us and harassing us and all this different stuff. And basically, is it not true that we were first in our own eyes grasshoppers? And that we saw ourselves as grasshoppers, meaning something small, something insignificant, something impotent, something to be brushed aside. And that it is as a result of our seeing ourselves in that way first, that there came to be giants in the land who saw us in that way as well. Which is very interesting. So it doesn't have to be something that's frightening you or oppressing you or threatening you. It could be something wonderful that you want, that you get nervous when you think about having it, or that you get nervous even asking. It's like it's like I'm going to walk in and catch you feeling as though you are who you want to be. And I'm going to go, what are you doing? This isn't for you. This is for someone else. That is an indication that you're holding on to a self-concept that is too small or inconsistent with this thing. And so, that you're called upon, I think, then to sort of, you need to be born again. You need to drop that concept of self. And the way you do that is, easy, right? That's like saying if you have a muscle spasm, it's like, well, just relax that muscle. Thanks, you jerk. But basically, what you do is you observe yourself as you hold on to that concept of self. You go throughout your day and you say, there's an act of self-conception, and maybe you can't see that, but you can see yourself react to life. You can see yourself react to conversations. You can see yourself react to things that happen as you go throughout your day. And you can say to yourself, if that reaction were an indication of my self-concept, what might that reaction indicate about who and what I am conceiving myself to be? And you just lightly go throughout your day like that. And you go, if I were conscious of being who and what I'd like to be, how do I think I would have reacted to what just happened? I've had instances where people have inconvenienced me, slighted me, behaved impolitely, relative to me or something like that. And the natural response for me was to respond with, forgiveness isn't even the right word, with like an overflow of magnanimity. And it was not me being a martyr. It was not me doing them a tremendous favor. It issued forth naturally from my being as a result of the state of consciousness I was in. And to the extent that I'm aware of being who and what I want to be, someone else says, I'm sorry, I got to reschedule this, whatever. Oh, no problem at all. And the inclination is to console that person and say, not to worry, right? If I'm aware of being other than that which I would like to be, and you inconvenience me, you may get a very different response, right? And so that's just kind of a little bit of an overview about if it's scary to imagine having what you want, it's because you're imagining yourself as one for whom it is unnatural to have that thing. So.
Totally. So let's go through some of the questions that came in. Let's see. Who did you build Imagination School for? What problems or what cycles are we trying to help people with?
I built it for people who have an imagination. There's not specific things that it works for. The only thing I would say is that if you're going to complain about the learning curve and applying it in your own life, if you're going to rush to demonstrate to yourself, this doesn't work, I knew it. If you're going to complain about an abundance of information, you know what I'm saying? There's a lot of words that are being spewed out in this video. That's how it is here. There's other places it's not that way. For here, we're heavy on the content. And so there are relatively few things that are disqualifying for a person. We people, if you want to learn, we want to share the information for you, not just to give it to you off the rack, but also help tailor it to your own sort of, personal idiosyncrasies. Because what I found made all the difference for me is that, you take an idea and you put it on the person and it's, maybe it could be nice, but it's a little baggy. Take it in a little bit here, let it out a little bit there, fits you like a dream. All of a sudden, then, okay, now we're working with it. It's great. There is no thing for which this stuff doesn't work. There is no personality type for which it doesn't work, except for the person who if you have to work yourself up into a frenzy to enroll in the course, don't enroll in the course. Imagine having enrolled in it, or imagine what your life would be like if you had, or whatever, and then maybe enroll in it next time. Don't do that, because if you come in with that super duper pressure, it's going to make it really hard for you to get the most out of it. If you come in and you're not, it takes some time to warm the clay of your mind up. It takes a certain amount of, that doesn't have to take a ton of time, but in my experience, it takes a while. You're going to probably wrestle with yourself a little bit. Some people, they just get it right away. Other people, there's certain things that, it's challenging for them to let go of fixed beliefs or whatever. If you're in a huge rush, I would say don't do it. I would say get out of the rush and then do it. You know what I'm saying? For the most part, it works beautifully with everything because it is such a high, it sits so high in the sort of hierarchy of your being. It's like, do you want stuff? Do you have an imagination? Do you imagine things? Are you good at entering into and partaking of the opposite? Meaning, if you don't have something that you do want, are you really good at using your imagination to enter into a state of awareness of having the thing that you want? So much so that your entire consciousness is permeated with the feeling that would be yours if you actually had that thing in objective reality. Are you really good at totally letting go of this, completely losing yourself in that, and then also then conjuring that felt sensation inside? No, yeah, I know what it feels like. No, actually becoming aware of the reality of something that's not expressed, let's say that's not manifested. Are you good at doing that? Are you good at observing your inner conversations? Or and if you want to develop those skills, then I think this is a very good thing for you. Is there a person for whom it isn't? I don't think there is.
Well, if you have trouble with the biblical language, because we will be talking about that a good deal, and so if you are resistant to it, or you find, I don't know, your brain shuts down when you start hearing Bible verses, that would be a person. If you're very,
and if you're not willing to overcome that.
Yeah.
That I understand that aversion. It's very strange to me to hear Bible things coming out of my mouth, right? You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But it's not what you think it is. I'll just put that out there. It isn't what you think. Yeah.
Let's see some other questions. Can you think your way out of trauma-induced anxiety?
Gosh, that seems like a trap. I'm very uncomfortable with anybody who tells you that you can't do anything. So there's certain words there. I'd have to know what you mean by think. I'd have to know what you mean. I think that there is a way for a person who has experienced anxiety for a really long time to move into a state to so rearrange themselves that they don't have to experience that anxiety anymore. I think that's true. And I think if someone tells you that that's not possible, that person is. Here's the thing that happens a lot. People want to attain to a certain level of expertise, and they want to have a reputation as being an expert. And a big part of being an expert is telling people what's not possible and what they can't do and what won't work. And that sort of is offensive to me, because I don't know what you can't do. I know that a lot of people can have trouble changing the way they operate their mind. I know that and thinking is something that occurs downstream from what we're talking about. We're talking about assumptions. We're talking about, you think about imaginal activity is here, and thinking kind of orbits around core imaginal activity. It's downstream from it. There are assumptions that are a part of your who and what you are aware of being, part of your self-concept. And the thoughts that pop onto the screen of your mind are downstream of, and they are everything external is bearing witness to something internal. That's kind of one of the concepts that we kind of put out there. And again, just pretend. One of the suggestions I put in an email, it was an email, right, that we wrote or maybe it was in my stories. We just want to pretend that all this stuff is true.
Oh, right, yeah. Someone asking about how is this different than other manifestations?
That's right, yeah. It's not serious and it's not heavy, and I'm not saying, well, I'm a master of manifestation, and here's how it is, and a lot of people don't know this, but why don't we just say pretend? Because when I was a child, I would pretend and things would happen. And it worked really well, right? When you turn into an adult, you kind of get stiff and kind of just grumbling and all that different stuff. Overgrowth of the reasoning mind. And so it's possible for a person, yes, basically. Yes, it's possible. It is not a treatment. And this is not ass covering liability, pushing off. That's not what this is. I'm trying just to accurately convey my understanding of what's true. It's not going to treat you. It's not going to fix you. You will begin to interact with the reality of the way that you currently are and with what your mind currently does. React in a gentle and resourcefully redirecting way. So I don't know if that makes sense. Hopefully that answers the question.
I think also is just thinking about trauma-induced anxiety. So something happens, and this is the conflict shock, the DHS. So something happens and one is does the conflict itself, like I believe that conflicts arise from preceding states of consciousness, that, every kind of state of consciousness you enter into, there's certain kind of potentialities within that state of consciousness that you can encounter. And so now we've got a trauma, now we've got a conflict. And, in the moment that happens, you kind of sign your name to certain beliefs about yourself. Because this thing happened to me, that means I'm not safe. So anxiety, constellation wise, is a, double frontal fear. I'm heading into danger. I'm powerless. My hands are tied. Something bad is coming at me and there's nothing I can do about it. And so if that happens once in your life, then there are tracks around that kind of thing. And basically you have consented to this idea in consciousness that I'm a person for whom my hands are tied and there's nothing I can do about the stuff that happens to me in life, right? And so that becomes so woven into the identity of the individual that it does seem like I can't just think my way out of this. What do you mean? I could just imagine something different. Something really, truly bad happened to me. This was, extremely traumatic. And now from this point forward, and yes, if you just stay on that track, if you stay in that one realm of experience, what happened in the past is forever going to determine what's going to happen in your future. But is that the only way? Are there not other ways? Has there ever been a person who had trauma-induced anxiety at one point and then got rid of it? Well, yeah. I mean, there are people that have had horrific, terrible, crazy things happen to them and dealt with terrible, awful symptoms and patterns and tracks for the longest time and then resolved it, healed from it, right? And so if it's possible for anybody to do it, it's possible for anybody to do it, because when you realize it's about the things that are happening, because is that, trauma-inducing event, is it happening now? Well, no, it happened at a point in the past. And now, my ancient biology, it's just going to, continue on with whatever that deep psyche programmed idea is, right? But when you realize that you can detach from that, you can change that, and you can develop a new identity. You can believe new and different things about you and your safety in the world. A lot of people, though, it's as though it's unchangeable because of how deeply the signature is impressed on the soul of the individual, how deeply impressed that moment was upon them, that they're like, I couldn't ever in this lifetime be different. It's like, the universe just says, yes, whatever you believe. And so a person says, well, I did believe that I could get rid of it and I didn't get rid of it, so that means it's not possible. Well, that doesn't mean it's not possible. It does mean that it is, there's something to it. It can be difficult to detach your identity from these things that have happened to you in the past, right? And especially, even generational things. Like if your mother's, if everyone in this family line has believed and has been under that spell and in that state of consciousness, it can be quite difficult to detach yourself from that identity. But that doesn't mean it's not possible. And that again, even when, one of the things that Neville addresses, and I don't remember which lecture or book, but like failure, like when it doesn't work, right? When you're trying to manifest, when you're trying to get this outcome and it's not working, it's because there's doubt. It's because there is not full and complete, there's a part of you that doesn't believe fully in your imagination and your capacity to do it, and that might seem for some people like, oh, I'm just not believing enough. And it's like, okay, if that's look at that attitude.
Well, it's missing the mark.
Yeah.
It's like, I have a gun and I like to go out and shoot it in the woods sometimes, right? And what I do is I set a target up for myself and I aim at it, and most of the time I miss. Now, why do I miss? I miss because I had a goal. Had I never defined a goal, if I'm just going, you know what I mean? Like, woo boy, I'm a cowboy, right? I'm not going to miss because I'm not aiming at anything. But I set the goal, and I think the thing is, and something else too that you were really strongly alluding to there, which was like, am I capable of inadvertently consenting to ideas of impossibility without realizing it? Just to say, I am in this moment actively engaged in the act of consenting to a notion of impossibility, and I don't even recognize that imaginal activity for what it is. Now, again, I'm not like impugning you and saying that's what you've been doing and that's why you're not having. What I'm saying is, if that's true for me, if I have the ability to consent to a notion of impossibility and not even realize that, that's a liability for me. If I'm going to be believing that something's not possible for me, I at least want to be able to go, I'm believing something's not possible for me right now, so that I can take an accurate account of what's going on internally, so that I will have a complete picture of whatever relationships may exist between what's going on internally and what's going on externally. And one of the biggest traditions that we inherit, I think, from our family, but also just from humanity, just as a kind of phenomenon, beliefs in impossibility. And then the moment that those beliefs in impossibility are what's the word, pried out of our hands, which is to say we lose the ability to believe it's not possible, the first thing we do is rush to impose beliefs about the conditions under which what we begrudgingly now acknowledge is possible have to happen. We say, unless da-da-da, then this can't happen. And it's a strange thing to watch the reasoning mind do that. And so it's do you want to spend the time to really, I think that self-honesty is a skill, and it takes a lot of work to develop the ability to be honest with yourself. It's not even about a willingness. That comes later. But really, it's just the ability of if I were bullshitting right now, would I know it? If I were actively involved, and again, it's not about, herding the cats of thoughts. Oh, there's a negative thought. Let me go get it. Oh, no, if I don't get that negative thought's going to manifest as illness. That negative thought's going to make it so that I stay anxious and all this different stuff. Do you understand that there's imagination operating back behind that? You're imagining that if you don't get that thought's going to create problems for yourself. That is downstream of your self-concept. What's your self-concept? I'm not okay. Things aren't okay. This isn't okay. I've got to fix that before I can be okay. You're making yourself very small, making the problem very big. The problem is what? Maybe it's your situation, or maybe you've gotten into personal growth, and the problem isn't your situation. The problem is that you can't think about the situation in a way that doesn't make it scary to you. It's still something that's external. So it's about saying, what ideas would I have to hold about myself in order to be freaked out or depressed or ashamed of the fact that I deal with this anxiety? You see this? Everything is revealing to you something about, everything is trying desperately to reveal to you something about your most intimate relationship that you have, which is with yourself. If I'm ashamed of the fact that I have this, crippling anxiety, what do I have to believe about myself in order to be ashamed of this? Rather than saying, gee whiz, it sure will be nice when I don't have to deal with this bullshit anymore. Or, wow, what would it be like if I didn't have to not only not have these panic attacks, but what if I didn't have to worry about having these panic attacks? I could go on long drives. I could do all this different stuff. People very often are, and if you want to get a sense for, there's a difference between what a person thinks of when they hear the word belief, what the word belief kind of connotes in the mind, this is belief, that's a belief, and what the reality of a belief is. The reality of what a belief is a governor that rules over a principality within your mind. It is a governor that rules a region of your mind, and it says that must not. That's what a belief really is. It doesn't float across the screen of your mind's eye and say, I'm a belief that you can't do it. That's not how it works. And that's the reason why I hate that. That's the reason that, that you look at the shadows cast by these more profound internal activities. One of the kind of shadows that they cast will be your reactions to life, right? How do you react to that situation where, I don't know, what the specific situation is with this person, but something happens and it triggers anxiety, or perhaps nothing happens and that triggers anxiety. Nothing is a kind of a something. The anxiety comes up, right? So the anxiety at one level, the anxiety is a reaction, right? Okay, so fine, we know about that one. How do you react when the anxiety occurs? How do you react to the reaction of anxiety? And that's very often where a lot of times, for people like the anxiety people, I'm not okay, it's not okay, this isn't okay. Something extremely not okay happened, and it's set up like this sort of place of praying the holy rosary of not okayness. I'm not okay, they're not okay, it's not okay, we're not okay, nothing's okay. And there is this a fanatical devotion to the idea, to the assumption of not okayness. What's going on out here isn't okay. The fact that I'm having an anxious attack is not okay. The fact that I inconvenience the people I care about with my anxiety, that's not okay. The fact that I can't let my anxiety be okay, that's not okay. And so that is a religious commitment to ideas about anxiety and about yourself. And a lot of it is begin to shake those things loose. What if it is okay? And they'll say, but I hate it. And I'll say, well, those aren't mutually exclusive. What if it's okay that you hate it? And what if it's okay that it's happening? What if it's okay that it sometimes makes you feel so depressed you can't even imagine living like this for a minute? What if that's okay? What if that's all right? What if that's not a problem? Who and what would you need to be conscious of being in order to be willing to consider the possibility that maybe what's happening right now isn't a problem? And I would put an asterisk by isn't a problem. I'm not saying that it isn't something worth fixing. I'm not saying it's not something that you deserve to live without. I'm not saying that if I were dealing with it, I wouldn't be every bit as miserable as you are. Not a problem means something that you are not obligated to react to unresourcefully and in ways that make your experience worse. That's what I mean by not a problem. You see how we're kind of getting into the self-concept stuff here? We're sort of, this is what awareness school is going to consist of, just so you know.
Imagination school.
Oh, excuse me. Well, it's also true.
Michelle wants to know, she says, I know a bit about Neville, a bit about both of you. Will Imagination School be about God or organized religion-ish? I would like to join the class.
The organized religion is the Zoom meetings at 4:00 on Monday. And if you're uncomfortable with that level of organization, then we can't. We can't go beyond. The anarchy can't be. Pay the money and roll in the course. We'll be live when we're live, and if you miss it, too bad. Really, But that's it. It has nothing whatever to do with organized religion. Neville's perspective is that organized religion is what's... Now, if you're into going to church and if you enjoy the community aspect and all that different stuff, that's not a problem. I'm just saying that what Neville's getting at is something that's not incompatible with that or inconsistent with it, but it is something that exists independent of it. That it is entirely personal, that the biblical stories are intimate in a way that you cannot imagine because they pertain not to realities that exist outside of you, but to realities that exist within you, that are embedded within you. They are states of consciousness that you enter into. It's a bunch of stories that are told in an attempt to reveal you to yourself. So it's about as far from stuffy, stodgy, organized religion as you can possibly imagine. I mean, you think I'm going to be involved with Michelle, you know me. They'd kick me out. And so... Yeah, it's not like that. Now, I will say just before that there will be sometimes language used that may trip wires in your mind that goes, I don't like the way that sounds. I don't like the way, oh, he said that. Oh, and there are other people maybe who come from a religious background or who are still involved with it, and they are uncomfortable hearing people use this language in a different context because at first hearing, it seems as though it might constitute a sort of diminishment of the you know what I'm saying, that it's not sufficiently reverent because it is so personal. People sometimes get into this, the history or their tradition teaches them that which is most holy and that which is most really high and spiritual is that which has zero application to their personal wants whatsoever. It's about out here. It's not about you and all this different stuff. And so people can get kind of uncomfortable with something that's so relevant to them.
But God's will, like this thing, like God's will is something apart from what's going on within you. That some people would have, difficulty with certain ways of understanding and describing the language. But we would invite, that person that is, interested in applying it at this deep personal level. I mean, I just find it's so radical. And when you get the language in that way, when you see it not as this thing apart from yourself, but you see it as a story that's awake within you, it's just incredible. And
there are many people who have, you might say, been around the religious block and have had their fill of it, who absolutely love this stuff. That we've talked to them in kind of preview and some of our other groups and things like that. That's kind of what gave rise to the idea for Imagination School, and they love it. And they say things like, "I cannot believe that I'm looking forward to hearing more about what you have to say about Jacob and Esau," or about, that you're talking about, do you have a few minutes to talk about Jesus Christ? And I can't believe that I actually understand what you're talking about. And I say, yes, in fact, I'm very interested in having that personal relationship. I'm telling you, someone misheard just now. I heard you mishear it. That it's not. It's just not what you think it is, right? It is more, and it isn't. It isn't one of these things where it's actually the same old stuff, slightly rebranded or slightly. It's not that. It is all psychological. It's all within you. It is all, when we're talking about your imagination, we are talking about a divine force, we will say. But it's not, see, even that, oh my God, it's like all of this language is so encrusted with centuries of misconception. It's lifetimes worth of misconception, right? That it takes you out of awareness of this. It's about you, what you want, how to create it, and how you can become more intimately acquainted with the reality of who you are, as you go through life living fully, creating more of what you want, responding in ways that are more elegant and rewarding to things that happen, whether they're good or bad or whatever, it's imminently relevant. You don't have to give anything up. You don't have to give up sex or smoking, anything. You can smoke whatever you want. So it might even help. I don't know. Alcohol. I mean, you don't have to stop wanting money. You don't have to pretend to feel the feeling of love for everybody all the time. None of that's necessary. You don't have to stop following politics if that's something that you like to do. You don't have to start doing anything you don't want to do. You don't have to follow a diet. It's all that bullshit. It's all this external stuff that, like, you've got to do this and you've got to do this and you've got to conform to this. This is something that applies to something that is so high and something that is so inward and so deep and so personal that it precedes all of that stuff. Now, you might have lovely nutritional things that you follow, and you know what I'm saying? You might have a great community that's spiritual in nature, and all that is just fine if you enjoy those things and all that. The key thing is that it not come between you and what we're trying to get at here. This is the injunction. This is no gods before me. We're working with the me referred to in that, and it's not anything out here. But there's like a trillion things out here that will distract you from this presence within yourself, and it creates all sorts of problems and confusion. But when you can actually kind of stay within here, right, and recognize that, oh, that's my awareness right there, that's my imagination right there, things change.
Michelle goes, sex, drugs, and imagination. Love that.
Sex, drugs, and imagination, yeah, and so that's our phrase now, and if you use it, we'll cease and desist. I stole that before you even came up with it.
So good.
I gave that one to you.
Yeah. So what else? We opened up this new option. So this is going to be the most affordable way to join us for 9 weeks of anything. We opened up a sliding scale option for enrolling in Imagination School. Since it's the first time we've ever done this class, and there are a lot of people that have expressed interest, that have expressed to me that they don't see themselves yet. They can't imagine paying multiple thousands of dollars for a course. And so we wanted to create something where we want to challenge you, to pay. We made it open so that there's a lower amount that you can pay to just kind of get into the class. But we want you to imagine, yourself expanding in your financial income and allowing more money into your experience. The cap on your finances right now is imaginal. The reason that you can't see yourself spending a certain amount on a class, the reason that money isn't there available for you to just kind of, oh, this looks good to me, I'll do that. Oh, it's this amount? Okay, I'll pay that, no big deal. The reason that that's not available to you right now is because of your imagination. And so I don't know if we'll ever offer this sliding scale option thing again.
Somebody must be out there imagining. Somebody was treading that wine press because we've never done this before.
I know, right?
I don't know why I'm saying, yeah, let's do this. There's no precedent for this whatsoever. So somebody out there, and I don't approve of this, somebody out there was using their, just kidding, someone was imagining this. And so I think this would just be a lot of fun, just to kind of get people. And this thing too is, I heard you, and it's such a good thing. I'd say if you want more money, imagine that you want more money, and it's like, that's 100% true. And there's a lot of people out there who are just full of shit who talk like that sometimes. And so there's this kind of connotation thing we have to kind of untangle. When you want something, the purpose of that desire, it is an invitation to you to ascend in consciousness to the awareness of being one for whom the having, the doing, the being of that thing is natural. And so, yes, it's good that you want it. Yes, it's good that you have it. But the attaining of that thing, the hunger that you experience, serves a very high purpose, which purpose is to ascend that ladder of awareness, to become a person not only who has it, but who can have it without feeling weirdly guilty about it or afraid or ashamed of that. And in the process of doing that, you discover certain things about the nature of yourself and about the nature of reality. And there's something magical about when you take yourself from this state to that state, to this state, to here again another state, you develop the ability to distinguish between the state of consciousness and the consciousness occupying that state, which as far as I can tell is the entire point of existence. It is the thing that acquaints you with yourself. It's the thing that acquaints you with God. It's the thing that breaks down, it's not what you think, by the way, the thing that breaks down the barrier that exists between those two things, so that, one fine day, there isn't you in that, there's just you as that thing. Wonderful fusion. The two become one kind of thing. And so we'll be covering that. We'll be covering a lot of really practical things. We'll be playing. We'll be having fun. I think it's going to be great. I think you're going to know if it's for you. If it's not for you, that's okay. I have no difficulty at all imagining why somebody would be sort of, there aren't very many places that a person can be in their process of you call it awakening or development, or just kind of, maybe it's not a progression, it's just the place that they are right now in terms of states. There aren't very many states that a person can be in that would cause them to want to do something like this. So it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you if you don't want to do it. It doesn't mean that you're not as far along as the other people are or whatever. It's just at this moment, what we're talking about and the state that you're in, they don't jive, and that's fine. And it's maybe it'll be different in the future, maybe it won't, whatever. And that's kind of a big part of what this stuff is about.
Yes, every class will be recorded, so if you can't attend live, you can watch the replay. You can submit questions before. So we like attendance. We like for people to attend live for the interaction because it makes it more fun. But if you, I think somebody messaged me about they live somewhere where they can't attend live. We're totally fine if you want to just attend the watch the replay. So. Thank you for being here. This is a really fun chat. We will have one more of these chats before we start up on Monday, March 3rd at 4 p.m. And we'll be meeting all of March and all of April. And it's going to be so much fun. And we hope that you come pretend and imagine with us in Imagination School.
Yeah. See you. Thanks for being here.